In music, the coda is an escape to the end. The symbol is a crosshairs. I'd like to read to you a small segment from a chapter, Moscow, November 1892. Takes place in Tchaikovsky's flat with his lover Ivan, who was modeled after his real lover, Edward Zach. Late one evening, while Peter and Ivan were having a quiet time in each other's arms, there was a knock on the door. Peter put a finger to Ivan's lips to let him know to be quiet. He did not want her to think he was there. "Господин Tchaikovsky," his landlady called out in a hushed voice. Peter looked at Ivan, his eyes wide. She screeched in the smallest possible whisper, as if something might be wrong. "Господин Tchaikovsky." Then from a poke of the landlady's toe, the door slowly swung open, causing Peter to freeze as he saw his landlady holding a tray of poppy seed strudel, her eyes wide with fright. The doorway framed an image that Peter feared would cause unwelcome consequences. The landlady stood gaping at Ivan and Peter, who were standing together, not fully dressed, and without saying a word. She gently placed the tray on the floor and turned around. She stood for a moment with her back to the doorway, looking up to the heavens as she trotted towards the stairs, mumbling and crossed herself repeatedly in broad sweeps. Peter Ilyich and Ivan stood frozen in a failed tableau displayed to a cruel and critical audience. Peter looked at Ivan's terrified face and for a brief moment felt the gravity of the encounter. But his soberness vanished quickly, and a stifled chuckle cascaded into a giggle and broke into a drunken laugh. Ivan's face glowed and his rosy cheeks nearly eclipsed his sapphire eyes. This was a happy time to be coveted, but their carelessness would have a price. Ivan asked in a cautious voice, "Is this how it will be, evading every suspecting eye? Will people ever see past the crushing influences of Russian inhumanity?" Peter walked to the other side of the room with his head down, and after a short term, turned to Ivan. In one edition of the Beethoven piano sonatas, there's a misprint. A C sharp is printed as a C natural. The printing is so blatantly wrong that any sane pianist would make the correction with little thought. If the correction is not made, the sound is a terrible assault on the ears and the intellect. Nevertheless, one occasionally hears that sonata performed with that wrong note. The pianist would rather have his ears abused with what he must know is wrong than oppose the presumed authority of Ludwig van Beethoven, the great master. The offensive error is repeated in concert again and again by trusting musicians with the fear that disobeying Master Beethoven is beyond their domain of influence. Authority, whether real or perceived, is hard for some to challenge, no matter how it affronts them. This is the Russian Orthodox Church. I'd like to read some fragments from the chapter. Deadly confrontation takes place in modern-day Moscow, May 22nd. It takes place in the upper attic of the Moscow Conservatory of Music. Fred and his lover, Alex, and their friend Susan are looking for evidence of Tchaikovsky's lover. Margot, the assassin, is out to get them. With a determined pace, Margot climbed the stairs of the conservatory with her hand firm on her gun. She stopped for a moment and felt for the silencer in her wrist pack, then slipped it out and assembled the cobalt blue silencer on her Glock pistol. Skipping a little bit and moving on, Margot stood fast, with both hands holding the gun pointed at Fred. Alex looked down at Fred, staring at the gun that moved slowly back and forth like a cobra about to strike. Alex watched Susan move slowly away. He put his hand over his mouth and stopped breathing. From the catwalk, Alex glared at Susan and mouthed, "Don't look up. Don't look up. Don't." He moved his hands back and forth. "Do not look up." Susan looked down and Alex breathed a sigh. Alex leaned to move back, but his legs froze by the edge of the catwalk. "Where is the music?" Margot snarled. Then turning to Fred, she said, "And where is Alex hiding?" She took a few steps towards Fred. "Well?" she roared. Alex tried not to move as the photographs dropped from his hand. Margot said, "You don't have a choice. Give me the music." Fred raised his hand as if that would stop the impending bullet. "If we had it, I would give it to you." "We have nothing. It was stolen." He leaned back. "We can give you what we found. That's all we have." Margot raised her gun and pointed it at Fred's head. "Last chance." Fred turned his head away. Alex wanted Susan to make a distraction, but she didn't move or say anything. Susan was frozen, breathing heavily with her mouth opening and closing, but uttering not a single word. Margot turned towards Susan, aiming at her chest. Alex looked down at Margot standing under the catwalk. He slowly moved over to a huge wooden box full of manuscripts that was positioned near the edge, aware that the slightest creak would be his death. Alex heard the heartbeat, thumping like kettle drums in his breathing like a windstorm. He moved as slowly and as noisily as possible. He concentrated on sounds from below and coordinated his movements. "Margot, don't," Fred said. Alex nudged the crate an inch. "No more chances," Margot said. The crate made a squeal, moving on the steel grating. Alex backed off and froze and shut his eyes tight. He tried not to tremble, but that wasn't working. Susan glanced up and coughed loudly, which resonated from the far side of the room. "Thank you, Susan," he thought as he breathed deeply. Alex put his hands onto the crate again and nudged it a bit closer towards the edge. It made no sounds as it moved ever so slightly. Alex prodded the crate nearer to the edge, viewed down at his target, and finally gave it a shove. He stood back as it teetered at the edge for a moment and watched it tip, almost balanced. Then, like the slowness of cold honey, it tilted and with a snarling growl slid the rest of the way off the catwalk. Margot spun around and stared up. She glared at the box as it came straight towards her eyes. Alex inhaled loudly as it seemed to hover in midair, giving Margot enough time to raise her gun. She looked up and fired 3 shots towards Alex. Fred wailed, "No!" And there's a lot more to go. Don't forget, in music, Coda is an escape to the end. Its symbol is your crosshairs.